Welcome to the Darkstream. Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com. And tonight we're going to talk about the education of the evolutionist. We are indeed live. You know, I was looking at some of the points that were raised by people, looking at the points that were raised by some of the folks that were not particularly pleased by what we were discussing the other night. But the interesting thing was that, with the exception of a bit of a discussion on predictive versus postdictive models, there really wasn't much to discuss. Nobody actually raised any real issues about what we were talking about. There weren't any serious objections other than a few low IQ folks who had nothing to offer other than, simple mocking. But I thought a couple of the comments were significant, especially from people who studied biology. And Chantel Ford said, "I have a Bachelor of Science in microbiology and biology, and you're right. I only took first-year biostatistics. In the third year, I was expected to have a more advanced knowledge of statistics, but they provided no training for it. This was at the University of Sydney." Actually, there's a comment, appropriate comment now. "I'm in a PhD economics program. Our econometrics TA has been trying to estimate parameters for the marginal benefit mutations have on reproduction. He can't do it and no longer believes in the theory." Now look at the key there. Our econometric TA. If you're not aware of what econometrics are the mathematical modeling of economics. And so econometricians tend to be the more mathematically gifted economists. And so, in fact, I was somewhat tempted to go that route myself. And then I realized that just because you're good at math doesn't mean that you enjoy doing it. So, but it's not a surprise that a skilled mathematician who has literally trained to create mathematical models would change his mind about evolution once he starts looking at trying to actually model the mutation rates, the speciation rates, and so forth. Unmarked X. This is a comment now on the video from 2 nights ago. "The mathematics that go into modeling have never been taught to biological scientists, even as an elective course, and they are impenetrable by the supposed peers who supposedly review them for publication." So you have non-mathematicians authoring and reviewing and trying to read and understand what is essentially mathematics/computer science papers. This is true. They have no training for it. They have no ability for it. In fact, if you look at the relative IQs, relative SAT scores of the various scientists, of the people who declare majors, biologists are reliably, and have been for decades, the least intelligent of the scientists. And so Steve Alford notes, "The problem is that no matter how incredibly improbable, even to the point of essentially being impossible, a biological evolution hypothesis may be from a logical Bayesian perspective, the field is built on the prospect of billions of years in scale, with trillions of opportunities for mutations per month, day, second. So the total incidence of opportunity is a de facto infinity, therefore making every assertion a quote-unquote reasonable possibility, no matter how outlandish its actual potential for occurrence, thereby nullifying all sensible statistical objections and creating the illusion of validation for ridiculous claims if couched in proper jargon. They gave them, in other words, he's saying that the biologists gave themselves free rein to run roughshod over all of biology and indoctrinate impressionable young adults into believing outright retarded shit. The social scientists followed that blueprint well. Yeah, this is why Jordan B. Peterson loves biology so much. As a general rule, when you find someone who loves biology, they're not very smart. It's not a surprise that Jordan Peterson has an IQ of around 120. That's actually kind of the sweet spot for people who are biologists and very, very strongly into evolution and that sort of thing. You know, that's definitely the I fucking love science crowd. So, now you don't have to take my word for this. I mean, if there's one thing that you've learned about me, it's that I always do my homework. Hang on, I gotta get rid of this Mike's content guy. He's trying to troll us here. Not a good idea. We just take the borrow the band hammer from the Bears. I actually do need to appoint a moderator on YouTube as well as on stream.me, but we'll get around to that later. Anyhow, back to the business. Atrex says, this would explain why many of the biology majors that I know fall for the psyops push by the mainstream media. Well, that's correct. You know, they're just not terribly intelligent, and they're not very well educated. So, and let me prove that to you. I don't ask you to take my word for anything. I don't have any concern for, you don't ever need to just believe what I say. I never ask you to do that. So you don't need to volunteer. I've got 535 VFM. I'll just tell one of them to do it. So have a look at this. Actually, question, Mike Freeze, any plans on invoking a members-only chat? Oh, we'll definitely do that at some point in time, but I can't do it yet because I need to have 30,000 subscribers first. So, it's one of the interesting things is half the people that watch these streams are not subscribers. So I would encourage you to subscribe if you want us to be able to do that. So this is the list of required courses for the field of study in ecology and evolution. So this is the biology undergraduate program at Stanford University. Now have a look at what's required. Now I actually have a full list of the courses here. I'm going to hide this for a second because I want to show you something else first. So what we have here is the complete list. I don't want that. There we go. This is the complete list of all the courses that Stanford is offering in biology. Now I want you to notice something. We've got the ecology and evolution of infectious disease in a changing world, views of a changing sea, literature and science, introduction to conservation photography, human origins, introduction to human physiology, natural history, marine biology and research, hacking the genome, visions of paradise garden design, evolution from DNA to dinosaurs, ecology for everyone, introduction to laboratory research in cell and molecular biology, introduction to research in ecology and evolutionary biology. Lots of that. Microbiology experiments, physiology. Oh, here's one just on evolution. Cell biology, the human genome and disease, fundamentals of molecular evolution. There's a little bit on evolution. Ornithology, introduction to biophysics, the ecosystems of California, Anaf Habib says, the biology students in my philosophy of science classes, philosophy of biology in particular, rarely had any of the relevant aptitude, literacy, etc. on the core philosophy subjects, be it classical logic, epistemology, etc. That's not a surprise. So look at what they're learning. The science of extreme life in the sea. Ecology and evolution of animal behavior. The developmental basis of animal body plan evolution. Modeling cultural evolution. Neuroplasticity, advanced imaging lab, the hidden kingdom, evolution, ecology, and diversity of fungi. Ecology and evolution of animal behavior. Now, do you notice something that's missing from all this stuff? Do you notice something that is completely missing from all this stuff? Oh, here finally we have one mention. It's an advanced class, Bio 287A, Advanced Topics in Mathematical Evolutionary Biology. The math is almost completely missing. Now you could say, well, but these are just the biology courses. Well, here, now let's go look at what the actual requirements are. Oops, I need to keep that one up, sorry. Let's look at what the actual requirements are. So you have to take Bio 60, Bio 61, Bio 62. Then you have to take 5 of these 6 courses, which are, again, all generic biology courses. Then you have to take some labs. Okay, that's all legitimate. A little bit of chemistry. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Math. It says choose one sequence. 19, 20, and 21 are all math. I mean, they're all calculus. So basically, it's a slow walk into calculus. When I took economics, I had it in high school, then I had it again in college because I had to take it in college. It was a 1-semester course. But here they're slow walking it for the biology students. Connor says, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but would you consider debating JF on evolution? He has a background in biology as well as computer programming. I'm perfectly willing to debate JF on evolution, but if you watch my interview with him, then you'll probably see that it's not going to go terribly well. Not because we don't like or respect each other, but, you know, I don't think that JF is particularly strong when it comes to these subjects, which is math, statistics, etc. But yeah, I'd be more than happy to talk to him sometime about it. So now keep in mind, you can take the 3 calculus courses, so basically 3 courses to get you through calculus, or you can take what they call 51. Now 51 is actually a pretty reasonable course. That's a, it looks like a fairly legitimate course that combines algebra and calculus. Now what's really interesting here is, or you can take a 100 level engineering course, which covers some math, or if you have a single AP credit in math, you don't have to take it. Now that is a joke. That is absolutely a joke. Ryan Smith actually has a good question. Vox, calculus is beginner level math, so how can you act like you know math? I don't know math. I do not consider myself to be a math expert. But, you know, I am naturally good at it. I'm not a math genius, but as it happens, my son graduated from the most elite math course in the country, which is, I mean, it was a math course that is off the charts in terms of its difficulty. To put it in perspective, this is the kind of thing where they expect Fields medalists to come out of. My son will not be one of them. He did complete it successfully, but it was a close run thing. The level of the very, very small number of students in that course is almost unfathomable. We're talking about some of the most, legitimate math geniuses in all of Europe. And so I know very, very well that I am no math genius, but I do have a basic understanding of how math works, which is why I'm able to discern some of these things and grasp some of these things, even though I'm not going to be the one writing the mathematical models. Remember, I'm a game designer, and so I'm quite accustomed to having to build models. Now, I never bother working out the math myself. That's what I go and have the programmers do. But if you understand how that process works, then you can understand that I couldn't come up with the models if I didn't understand the basics of how the math works. So again, I'm absolutely not putting myself forward as any sort of mathematician, but I am, what's the best way to put it? I am math cognizant in a way that the average person, the average biologist simply is not. Anaf Habib says, I studied cognitive science and philosophy of science. I took 4 math courses, 2 on stats, 2 on classical logic. However, I have no aptitude of any sort in math, not my thing. But the bio people in my class were even less qualified. Well, there's no question of that. None whatsoever. And so, Wickenserve and eBay just threw in $10 for the heck of it, so thank you. JF says he'll debate me. That's fine. We'll do it sometime. I have no objection to that at all. Take That says, is your son better at math than you? He is absolutely better at math than me. I don't think that his capacity for it is any better, but he certainly focused on it in a way that I never did. So anyhow, so let's go back to the course catalog here. Remember, you can get out of math with just an AP credit. Physics. Again, you have a drawn out easy physics, and then you also have AP credit. Interesting. Statistics, Bio 141, and that's all you need. So what is Bio 141 anyhow? Well, let's have a look. Bio 141, Introductory Statistical Methods for Biological Data, Describing Data, Numerical and Graphical Summaries, Introduction to Probability and Statistical Inference, Hypothesis Tests and Confidence Intervals, Intermediate Statistical Methods, Comparing Groups, Analysis of Variance, Analyzing Associations, Linear and Logistic Regression, and Methods for Categorical Data, Contingency Tables and Odds Ratio. Course content integrated with statistical computing in R. So, these biology majors graduate with taking 2 days of 1 hour each, 1 hour and 20 minutes actually. So they basically get 2 hours of stats for 1 semester. That's it. And you wonder why they can't understand the problems with the theory? The funniest thing is that if you look at the PhD programs, whether it's at Stanford, whether it's at Harvard, what you'll find is that evolution is almost entirely irrelevant to most of the serious biology programs. Now, they do have tracks that specifically focus on evolutionary biology, and they tend to be very much smaller, and they tend to be almost irrelevant. And the thing is that there is no more requirement, no more math, no more statistics, beyond what you saw in those Stanford undergraduate levels. For example, what you have to do to get a PhD in the biological sciences at Harvard, the courses are analysis of the biological literature, principles of genetics, principles of molecular biology, principles of cell biology. And then they have skill courses, none of which have anything to do with statistics or math. They're intensive small group discussions focused on the critical analysis of basic research papers, from a wide range of fields, including biochemistry, cell and developmental biology, genetics, and microbiology. The papers are discussed in terms of their background, significance, hypothesis, experimental methods, data quality, and interpretation of results. But they don't have any ability to do so. They don't understand this stuff. Dawkins does not understand this stuff. I mentioned in The Irrational Atheist that a rather well-known French mathematician openly mocked Richard Dawkins and described him as innumerate. They literally don't understand the fundamental flaws in their theory and in their fundamental understanding of how biology works. Core content courses, principles of genetics, an in-depth survey of genetics beginning with basic principles, and of course it's the Drosophila, that fly, the usual bacteria. Principles of molecular biology. None of this stuff involves any math or any stats. And finally, they say, and this is cute, an advanced statistics course is also required. Remember, this is for the PhD, unless waived by the faculty based on the student's academic preparation. So they don't have to take it. If you can show that you've got stats somewhere on your undergraduate record, you can get out of it. And so what you're seeing here, what you're looking at this is a bunch of statistical illiterates trying to prove stuff that cannot be scientifically proved by definition. So they're trying to come up with statistical models to simulate it, despite the fact that they don't have the statistical knowledge or training, they don't have the mathematical background to create these models. When smarter, more numerate people attempt to create these models, they can't do it. It doesn't work. And so, so that's why it's a dead end. It's an intellectual dead end. And the worst thing about it is that they know this on some level. That's why they freak out and get so angry and get so upset and get very, very frustrated and start calling names, because they don't even have the ability to understand the fundamental nature of the criticisms you are offering. I mean, like I said, I will be more than happy to debate JF. I can tell you right now, it's probably going to turn out to be somewhat embarrassing. Possibly for me, but unless I see something very different from JF than I did the last time, I have a feeling that it's going to go somewhat the same way. And, maybe people will be convinced by what is likely going to be the dancing. I don't think that he or any other true believing evolutionist is going to change their mind on the basis of math and models they don't understand. But, we'll have to see. Edmund Burke says, this is the uniformity of mediocrity as predicted by de Tocqueville and Burke. Well, I think it's part of it, but I also think part of it is the fact that there's far too many people going to college. Most of the people who are now in college should not be there. It is wasted on them. And they've had to dumb down the programs significantly because they are trying to graduate people with lower IQs. Plaster of Paris says, among the public educated populace, most folks are just too intimidated to challenge the likes of Dawkins or their university professor. Seems like social engineering. Well, that's true, but here's the thing. Those professors are really easy to challenge. They're total cowards. You know, I took my Econ 101 course from Steve Stamos. He was pretty well regarded. He wrote the textbook that we were using. So he was considered to have a, pretty big name. It was a textbook. I wouldn't say it was widely used at the university level, but it was used by a number of other economics programs across the East Coast. And it was funny because one day in class, he said, you plan your day, you plan your week. Why wouldn't you plan something as important as the national economy? And I raised my hand and I said, you wouldn't plan a national economy because, first of all, it's too complex. Secondly, you won't have any information on value and therefore the intersection of supply and demand that creates pricing, which was first demonstrated by Ludwig von Mises in 1921 with the impossibility of socialist calculation, and then was further refined by Friedrich von Hayek in the 1950s. You wouldn't do it because it doesn't work. There's no pricing model. There's no pricing mechanic. And he took one look at me and said, well, that would be a reason, yes, and completely dropped that whole line of attack on all these naive economics students. I don't know whether he was actually familiar with either of those two papers to which I referred, but he knew that he was teaching nonsense. He knew on some level that he was teaching nonsense. And so, but they don't get called on it because, that's why they love to hang out with a bunch of 19-year-old ignorant kids. It lets them posture and preen and act like they know everything. But, they most definitely don't. Mayhem Bear asks, can you have a high IQ yet not be an intellectual? Absolutely. That's why I don't like Nassim Taleb's intellectual yet idiot. I don't regard them as intellectuals. Not at all. Frank Underwood asks, is biology disproportionately the recipient of lowering standards in higher education as it is a softer science? Did they learn math in the 50s? No and no. I think that biology has always been a soft science. That's why the biologists used to be denigrated as butterfly collectors. There's a lot, they were always dismissed as taxonomists. Joey says, what principles of evolution do you find problems with? Okay, the first principle of evolution that I have problem with is the concept of natural selection and fitness. That's a tautology. There's a little bit of a semantic sleight of hand at work with that principle, because what is fit? Well, whoever happens to breed the most. Okay. But the breeding is not entirely directed by the pressure of natural selection. If you look at, nobody ever does proper studies where they paint 50 polar bears pink and then they determine whether, what their relative reproductive rates are. That is the kind of experiment that would actually at least be relevant. It wouldn't be even remotely conclusive, but they just don't do that. What they do is they observe stuff and then say, well, it's consistent with the theory of evolution. But the thing is that no matter what happens, they claim that it's consistent with the theory of evolution because the theory of evolution is a tautology. Noam Chomsky demonstrated this. The whole concept of evolution seems like it makes sense, but it's either a tautology or trivially true. In neither case is it a sound or sufficient foundation for the ideas that it purports to bear the weight of. Castonia says, my anthropology honors course was basically a class in evolution and demeaning anyone who is a Christian. I wish I was exaggerating. Well, that's because there is no science to do. They don't want to do the kind of science that would have the potential for falsifying it because it's an assumption. And so they're almost all, I won't say all because there might be some validity to it somewhere, but almost all science that is related to evolution and evolutionary biology is a circle jerk. All they try to do is prove that things are consistent with the theory. But that's flawed from a philosophical point of view because it's not how science works. Science is not about assembling a minimum number of studies that are consistent with something in order to claim that it is true, because science is not about truth. Science is about falsification. But they don't dare do any studies that would falsify it. And even if they did, we know perfectly well that they would turn around and claim that it wasn't relevant for, if they painted 50 polar bears pink, and then it was determined that the 50 polar bears were actually more reproductively fit than the bears that had evolved in order to better suit their environment, that would technically, scientifically, falsify evolution. Do you think that there is a single biologist on the planet who would go, oh, well, I guess we're all wrong? Of course not. Let's see. Did Karl Popper ever comment on the theory of evolution? He did, and at one point he did honestly point out that it wasn't science. It's not experimental. It doesn't use the scientific method. Watchman 245 says that's not evolution, that's adaptation. No, but the point is, you're missing the point. The point is that in order to evolve, the mutation has to be more reproductively fit. It has to provide for more offspring than the alternative. It's very, I mean, that's very simple. That's literally what natural selection depends upon. If you don't have a reproductive advantage, a material one, and in some cases a fairly strong one, then nothing evolves. In the beginning says, aren't you the one who always appeals to evolutionary psychology in your alpha, beta, delta? No, I don't at all. I totally reject evolutionary psychology. I've published a book by an anthropologist that completely prison rapes evolutionary. Evolutionary psychology is literally science fiction. Except it's not really, it doesn't really involve science. Evolutionary psychology is less science than science fiction. There's nothing scientific about it. It's just people throwing out hypotheses with no evidence whatsoever, no scientific evidence for them whatsoever. Anaf Habib is on a roll here. He says, Kuhn's observation, he's talking about Thomas Kuhn, the author of this, was it Revolutions in Science? Great book. If you haven't read it, absolutely, I recommend it. Kuhn's observation is that 99% of science is actually maintenance work is accurate. Most scientists today do cleanup work, a la, yes, everything we already know is correct, stop overanalyzing. Well, yeah, most of what they do is totally irrelevant. Let's see here. Oh, he was answering somebody in the chat. Okay, sorry about that. Charlemagne says, I think they would go the tautology route and say pink was better for reproduction all along, but the bears just didn't have that mutation yet. That wouldn't work. They couldn't do it because how could it doesn't suit the environment. They can't come up with an argument to claim that somehow it would be, I mean, yeah, actually, now that I think about it, they probably could try to claim that, but at that point, everyone would start laughing at them. So if evolutionary psychology is nonsense, what do you think about Rollo Tomasi's work? I think that Rollo Tomasi's work is good when it comes to the practical stuff. I think that the explanatory aspect of it is nonsense. He has no idea. None of these people, not just Rollo, nobody has any idea why these things happen. Guys like Rollo are very good at the what. You can trust them when it comes to the what. The problem is that they want to explain why, and so they resort to these nonsensical ideas that sound good but have no basis in fact. Like I said, if you have not yet read Dr. Christopher Hallpike writing about evolutionary psychology, you should not express an opinion on it because he's an anthropologist and he completely obliterates one evolutionary psychologist after another. I mean, there's just nothing left. Is psychology more useful than biology? No, biology is very useful. You have to understand, most biologists have nothing to do with evolution. If you look at the advanced courses, if you looked at that list of courses from Stanford, most of them had nothing to do with evolution because evolution is totally irrelevant when it comes to biology. No, do you know anyone who works as an evolutionary engineer? No, you don't, because it's useless in that regard. Let's see. David Olson actually has a good point. Sexual selection is difficult to study and explain because it puts a lot of responsibility for human suffering on female mate choice, which is politically incorrect. That's true. Alba, are you going to debate Cernovich on Islam? He's trolling you guys. I mean, come on. Let's see. I'm missing a... Oh, here we go. Cave Bear Chris says, you are right. Circle jerk paleontologist friends didn't get the tautology. Simple. What survives? The fittest. What is fittest? That which survives. Yeah, I mean, it was really funny to see how Chomsky, who, does have some pretty wacky ideas and stuff, but is a very bright guy. It was interesting to see how he looked at the whole thing from a purely logical perspective and reached much the same conclusions that people who look at it from the statistical or the mathematical side do. So, sounds like evolutionary psychology has about as much science as Scientology. Xenu for the win. Yeah, actually, we've got the book up now. Let me It's actually at the Archaven store. I highly recommend. I mean, this is a book. If you have any interest in this topic whatsoever, you really have to read it, because it will put you head and shoulders well beyond anybody who is discussing this stuff. I mean, Hallpike is he's like 83 years old and he's still really sharp. Really brilliant guy. Here's the audiobook. Do we need God to be good? And again, he's an anthropologist, so he's not. This is not the kind of book you might suspect it being. It's not an apology. It's not really about God or the Bible at all. It's all about science. And I think I think that you'll find it very interesting. If you're at all interested in this topic, go to archavencomics.com and pick up the audiobook. It will blow your mind. Anaf Habib says, Cave Bear Chris, 100% correct. In fact, bio students in my class were even more hilarious. What survives? That which is fit. What is fit? That which pumps more babies out. What does that? That which survives. Yeah, the funny thing is that, it's not that difficult. That's why I'm working on this model. And in fact, I'm probably not going to debate JF particularly soon, because I think that it would be much more intriguing to show him the model, walk him through it, and get his perspective on it. Again, I like JF. I have nothing whatsoever against him. I respect what he's doing. I respect his courage. I just happen to disagree with him on this particular subject. So, and I can understand why people want to see us engage in this sort of debate. I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be great. But I also think that it will be more meaningful and more conclusive if I can actually show people what I'm talking about, rather than expecting them to make those abstract leaps themselves. Baron von Metzengerstein says, what is evolution good for? Food for art design for Resident Evil and other horror games. Yeah, those sketches of fetuses have really they've really paid off over the years for Hollywood. I mean, where would we be without Geiger? Have you read The Evolutionary Phenotype? Is that JF's book? I will definitely read it before I debate him. No question. Joe Rogan, proof of Australopithecine survival? No, I don't think so. I think that I think the other commenter the other day had it right, and he's actually a highly evolved form of rice. Brian Mustard says, great topics that you and Owen have been covering. What are your thoughts on the skull that was found in Chad, Africa, that dated back 6 to 7 million years? Farce, at what level do these farces operate? I have no thoughts on it. I'm more interested in the skulls that they keep finding that don't seem to be human. I think that is considerably more interesting to me. As far as the skull datings and stuff, I'm not even remotely surprised that they are continually finding various bones and various skulls and whatever that completely blow up the current evolutionary timeline. I expect that to happen. It doesn't surprise me at all. So, whether it's older, whether it's newer, doesn't really matter, because the older they find, the less time there is for the necessary mutations and changes to take place. It may sound really impressive when they talk about, but it's millions and millions of years. Well, yes, but think about the number of not just mutations, because the thing is, and this is what's funny whenever you talk to an evolutionist about mutations and stuff, they start talking about how quickly the mutations can happen. Okay, we'll give them that. But the problem is each and every mutation has to become dominant and outcompete the non-mutated model. And you also, so how quickly can that happen? You need to factor in that time as well. So, whenever you're talking to, like, Dawkins likes to talk about how this long chain of people holding hands going back to, and he's basically thinking of the mutated version, right? But before one form can become dominant, it's going to take an increasingly long time depending on the size of the population. So, Charlemagne says, is your interest in skulls for a skull throne? I'm mostly interested in SJW skulls. I'm pretty sure those, those ancient giants were probably not SJWs. Anaf Habib says, Vox, before you debate JF, you should consult the works of Bas van Frazen and Imre Lakatos. They are more contemporary philosophers of Kuhn, and their work will give you ample ammunition in your fight. I won't do that. And let me explain why. I am not interested in presenting the ideas of Bas van Frazen and Imre Lakatos. Now, I've heard about Lakatos, and I probably will read his stuff at some time. But remember, this is not my area. This is not my particular area of interest. And so I am much more interested in testing my ideas. I don't care about trying to, I don't care about trying to beat JF. That's not my goal. If JF is capable of teaching me things about evolution that I don't know, I'll enjoy that. I'll appreciate that. I mean, think about how great it is to have the opportunity to learn directly from someone. If I'll read The Evolutionary Phenotype. I've read The Selfish Gene. I've read a lot of other works. I think it would have been really great to be able to debate or talk to Richard Dawkins about The Selfish Gene. He had some interesting ideas in there. It would have also been fun to debate him about the God delusion and hammer him brutally, just because that was such a horrifically nonsensical book where the quote-unquote arguments presented were, as Stefan Molyneux would say, not even an argument. But, not everything is a kill stream. Not everything is about trying to prove that you're smarter than somebody else. There's plenty of people smarter than I am. Like I said, if I wanted to feel like an idiot, all I needed to do was, talk to a couple of the kids in my son's class. It was kind of funny. I actually asked my son about it because, he was working on these insanely difficult problems that look like, Chinese chicken scratchings or something. And I said, do you notice a difference between, the different people in the course? He said, yeah. He said, there's kind of three types. He said, you got the sort of regular smart people, and, we can walk up the mountain, but we have to go by we have to wind our way back and forth to get to the top. And then he said, then there's what I call the math minds. And he said, they don't need to follow the signs. They can just kind of climb up. You know, they don't go back and forth winding their way up. They just like climb straight up. They have to work hard, but they definitely take shortcuts. They definitely do it faster than we do. And then I asked about this one particular kid. My son just sighed and said, "Yeah, he's got a jetpack." he just straps the thing on and takes a rocket right to the top of the mountain. And so, so it was, it was really interesting to get his perspective on that. Slamurai Jamdone asks, "Hey Vox, is it still possible to get a couple of the titles of the game design books you mentioned the other day?" Yeah, I'll dig them up. I just forgot, frankly. So I will make sure to do that before the next stream. Frank Underwood says, "It's weird that some atheists think that proving evolution or the Big Bang disproves God, as he could have controlled both. You were right yesterday." Well, it's actually worse than that. The Big Bang is a term that was coined by a physicist and science fiction writer who is an atheist, Fred Hoyle. And he coined the Big Bang term because it was a silly term, and he didn't like the Big Bang because they thought that it was too much of an indication that God existed. You know, the idea that the Big Bang is somehow contradictory to God, the concept of God, is false. What actually contradicted the idea of God was what used to be called the steady state universe. The steady state universe is the idea that the universe has always existed. So therefore God could not have created it. But astrophysics, and astronomy and that type of science ultimately disproved the steady state universe, which was a blow to the atheists. But that's all been swept under the rug, of course, because if probably there's not 5% of you that recognize the term steady state universe. It's been completely swept under the scientific historical rug. Sam Sutherland says, "I told someone evolutionary psychology is useless because it can't be used to make predictions, but then I was given an example of how it has been used to make predictions." Well, it's not evolutionary psychology that's making the predictions. Remember, that's the why. All the stuff that I have added to that concept, to the alpha, beta, whatever, that has nothing to do with evolutionary psychology. It's just observations of patterns of behavior, which are predictive. That's actual proper science. But if I start talking about why, and it's, because Martians landed, that doesn't make it any more, that doesn't make it any more scientific. Blue Dan Bob says, "I just listened to The Last Closet, and I don't think I've ever been so terrified. The anguish in Moira's voice and the events were so devastating. God bless her, and God bless you for being able to edit the work." Well, thank you very much. It wasn't easy. It was one of the most unpleasant editing experiences of my life. And, it was bad to the point that my wife didn't like how it was affecting me. Just when you are forced to just even recognize that level of evil, it hurts you. And the fact that she went through it, the fact that she survived it, the fact that she came out of it with a faith in the God that she was told repeatedly and aggressively did not exist, is a very, very powerful story. But it is terrifying. Fortunately, we as Christians are not given a spirit of fear, because as awful as those tales of those demons in human form might be. One thing that you can pick up from that is they are even more afraid of us, and they are definitely more afraid of the God we serve. Starscream 1540 says, didn't they inadvertently run your polar bear experiment with zebras? If they mark a single zebra out of a herd with a different color, that zebra was killed, thus stopping its genetic line. Perhaps, I don't know. I mean, I'm not up on zebra theory, but I think that actually tends to prove that natural selection doesn't work. Think about it for a second. What is the zebra that is a different color? Is it the non-mutated version, or is it the mutated version? Obviously, the mutated version would be the one with the different color. So now I don't think that that's a particularly strong case. But the point is that there are a number of more useful experiments that could be done. I just like the idea of a bunch of biologists. I mean, let's face it, they're not very smart. So the idea that they would actually go and try to paint polar bears pink amuses me greatly. So, Vox, how old do you believe the Earth is? I don't have any opinion on it, but I have never believed for a second that it is, that the bishop of whatever's calculations of it being 6,000 years old have anything to do with anything. I am not a young Earth creationist. I have never been a young Earth creationist, and I don't think that there is any serious biblical justification for it. Let's see. Jilly Bear Lawson says, I keep meaning to order The Last Closet. I've just been a little fearful of it given my own past history. I think given your own past history, you'll actually find it ultimately comforting. I think you'll find it ultimately inspirational. Yeah, and I like, and this is exactly why Fred Hoyle and the other atheists hate the Big Bang. He said, Mayor Macbeth says, to me, the Big Bang is just God saying, let there be light. I mean, that was what's so funny. The Big Bang sounds exactly like the beginning of the Bible. Let there be light. I like what Nicholas Cohen says. The multiverse concept is an epicycle for the atheist worldview in the light of a non-steady state universe. It's not in the light of a non-steady state universe. It's in light of the statistical improbability of life ever being able to form chemically in this universe. There are so many factors. There's a pretty good book on it. I can't remember the name of it, but there's a pretty good book that talks about the number of very, very unlikely, statistically improbable coincidences that had to, the Goldilocks universe. There are so many very, very small changes that could have been made in the process, all of them which would have precluded any life being possible on planet Earth, that it's just not really considered all that likely. It's not considered all that likely that it could just be a complete coincidence. So the multiverse concept is designed to say, well, okay, yes, it was really unlikely, but if there's an infinite number of universes, then it had to work out in one. That's the real epicycle. Excuse me. Let's see. Is Rogan the next mutated form? Not of humans, obviously. So, all right, well, that pretty much covers it for today. I hope that you found this useful. I think it's great that JF wants to do this debate. I will actually be sure to go out and read his book, and it will be very, very interesting, I think, to see how I'm able to address his points and how he's able to address mine. Should be fascinating. All right, well, have a good evening. This is the Darkstream. I'm Vox Day.